Good morning, and welcome to Karma Stories. Wishing you a day full of peace, truth, and just enough karma to keep things interesting. Stay with us for real tales where justice always finds its way. It started with a smile and a signature. That's how most scams begin in communities run by charming men with polished shoes and HOA titles. Golden Sunset Villas looked like paradise manicured lawns, quiet neighbors, sunsets that could make you weep. But underneath the golf carts and garden parties, something ugly was feeding on the trust of the elderly. When Maggie Lin moved in, all she wanted was peace. What she found instead was an HOA president who was siphoning away the life savings of her neighbors, one special service fee at a time. And when Maggie started asking questions, they tried to paint her as the unstable one. What would you do if you uncovered a quiet empire of financial abuse right under your feet? Would you speak up, knowing they'd try to silence you too? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how this hits you. Let's begin the story. Golden Sunset Villas. Sounds like a place where you gently fade into a pastel-colored oblivion, doesn't it? After my husband, Frank, cashed in his chips last year, I figured I was due some quiet. 62, a newly minted widow, and a mostly retired private investigator. The emphasis on mostly, you never really hang up the hat. You just wear it less often in public. This luxury retirement community in the Florida sun seemed like a good place to practice benign invisibility. Turns out, invisibility is overrated when you start seeing things you're not supposed to. I'd been here maybe 3 weeks, long enough to learn the bingo schedule and identify the residents who hoarded the good pool loungers. That's when I met Elsie Harper. She was a wisp of a thing, with kind eyes that held a permanent state of bewilderment, like a startled bird. We bonded over a shared disdain for lukewarm coffee in the community clubhouse. It's the money. "Dear," she whispered one afternoon, her voice trembling as she clutched a floral print handbag to her chest. "It just vanishes." "Vanishes how?" "Elsie," I asked. My PI senses twitching despite myself. "From my account. Little bits, then bigger bits. And these bills?" She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a sheaf of official-looking invoices from the Golden Sunset Homeowners Association. Special fees, landscape enhancement levy, emergency plumbing reserve fund, administrative surcharge adjustment. I don't understand them. "Gregory, mister." "Sure." "Our president, he says it's all necessary." "Gregory Shaw." "Yes, Mr. Golden Sunset himself, tall, silver-haired, with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo, and a handshake that felt like a damp dish rag. He exuded an air of benevolent authority, the kind that usually masked a Napoleon complex or a serious gambling habit. I'd already had a brief, unappetizing encounter with him at the welcome tea, where he'd patted my hand and called me "dear lady" one too many times. The HOA here was a well-oiled machine, and Shaw was its chief engineer. These special fee notices were becoming a common complaint, especially amongst the older, more forgetful residents. Elsie was Exhibit A. "When you ask Mr. Shaw about these fees," I prodded gently. "What does he say?" Elsie flinched. "Oh, he just smiles that big smile. Says it's all for the good of the community, that it's complex. And perhaps I'm not remembering things clearly." Her eyes welled up. "He makes me feel so foolish." My internal alarm bells weren't just ringing. They were clanging like a 5-alarm fire. Shaw's condescension was a red flag the size of Texas. I'd seen his type before. Smooth talkers who preyed on vulnerability. The kind of man who'd steal your dentures and then try to sell you a premium dental comfort plan. A few days later, I decided to attend the monthly HOA community forum. It was held in the clubhouse's grand ballroom, a room that was neither grand nor much of a ballroom. Shaw was in his element, mic in hand, radiating false bonhomie, when Mrs. Rodriguez, a sharp woman who still had all her marbles, questioned a sudden $500 security upgrade assessment. Shaw's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went cold. "My dear Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, his voice dripping with patronizing sympathy. "Security is paramount, as I'm sure you understand. These systems are complex. The costs fluctuate. We have experts handling it. Perhaps we can discuss your confusion privately." Confusion. There was that word again, It was his go-to deflection. Mrs. Rodriguez, to her credit, didn't back down, but Shaw expertly steered the conversation to the upcoming shuffleboard tournament. After the meeting, I struck up a conversation with Arthur Jenkins, a grumpy but observant man who used to be a CPA. This whole setup stinks, if you ask me, Arthur grumbled, stabbing a finger at his now cold coffee. You hear about Henderson, lived in Villa 12B, started asking too many questions about the reserve funds, demanding to see the detailed audits. Next thing you know, his son's down here. Papers are signed, and Henderson's declared incapable of managing his affairs. Shipped off to Whispering Pines nursing home faster than you can say embezzlement. Ooh, my blood ran cold. Whispering Pines. That wasn't just a warning shot. That was a kill shot. Golden Sunset Villas was starting to feel less like a retirement paradise and more like a gilded cage. I noticed the subtle signs of fear in some residents. The way they'd lower their voices when discussing HOA matters. The quick, nervous glances towards Shaw or his committee members if they were nearby. Others seemed to have given up completely, shuffling through their days with a kind of weary resignation. I needed more information. My PI instincts, rusty but still functional, kicked in. I started observing, making notes. Shaw had a tight inner circle, a few sycophantic board members who parroted his lines. They operated like a closed network, all smiles and community spirit on the surface, but with an undercurrent of something predatory. Two interesting characters emerged from the background static. The first was a kid, maybe 19, 20, named Leo. He lived with his grandmother, Mrs. Petrov, a quiet woman who mostly kept to herself. Leo was a classic tech nerd, pale, always hunched over a laptop, fingers flying. I'd seen him in the clubhouse library, supposedly using their Wi-Fi. He had an air of bored genius about him. A hacker. I'd bet my pension. If digital dirt needed digging, he was probably my shovel. The second was a familiar, and not entirely welcome. Vice Alistair Finch, ex-detective, homicide. We'd butted heads on a particularly nasty case in Chicago about a decade ago. He thought I was a meddling civilian. I thought he had the investigative finesse of a drunken badger. Now here he was, looking older, pountier, but with the same shrewd, assessing eyes, playing cribbage in the games room like he owned the place. He spotted me, and a flicker of something, annoyance, recognition, crossed his face. This could be complicated, or useful. Maggie Lin, as I live and breathe. Finch drawled one afternoon, cornering me by the shuffleboard court. Didn't peg you for the early bird special type. People change. Alistair, I said, my voice cool. Or maybe they just run out of patience for city life. And city cops. He grunted. Still a charmer? I see. So, what brings a hard-boiled PI to the land of liniment and lethargy? Retirement, I said, a little too quickly. His eyes narrowed. Right? And I'm here for the invigorating intellectual stimulation of the HOA newsletter. He leaned in. Word is, you're asking questions? About Shaw? About the money? Just making conversation with my new neighbors, I said innocently. Finch snorted. Conversation. Sure. Let me give you a piece of free advice. Lean? Shaw runs this place like his own private fiefdom. Some of these folks, he gestured vaguely, are scared. Others are too far gone to notice they're being fleeced. You stir things up. You might find yourself on the wrong end of a wellness check that results in a one-way ticket to a place with padded walls. Thanks for the concern, Alistair, I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. It's touching. He just shook his head. Don't say I didn't warn you. This isn't Chicago. The sharks here wear cardigans and orthopedic shoes, but they bite just as hard. He was right about the fear. I saw Elsie later that day, clutching another special maintenance levy notice, her face pale. Mister? Shaw's assistant said if I don't pay, they'll have to assess my living situation. She stammered. Assess her living situation. The polite, HOA-approved term for we'll kick you out or declare you incompetent. Frank always said I couldn't resist a puzzle, especially one with a bastard at the center of it. Gregory Shaw was rapidly becoming my new favorite bastard. And Golden Sunset Villas, with its manicured lawns and its carefully concealed menace. was no longer a place for quiet retirement. It was a case, and Maggie Lin, was back on the job. The new girl in Sunset City was about to make some waves. Alistair Finch's warning about sharks in cardigans echoed in my ears, but it only sharpened my resolve. Elsie was scared, and rightfully so. This wasn't just about confusing bills, it was about systematic exploitation. Frank always said I had a bulldog grip once I sank my teeth into something. Gregory Shaw was about to learn Frank knew me well. My first target. Those damn HOA invoices. Golden Sunset Premium Services, LLC. Read the letterhead for everything from advanced horticultural maintenance, trimming the already plastic-looking hibiscus, to emergency plumbing response coordination, plunging a toilet. The fees were astronomical. A quick online search for the LLC's address led me to a P.O. box in a strip mall an hour away. A little more digging, cross-referencing business licenses with property records, and bingo. The P.O. box was registered to a shell corporation, which, after peeling back another layer, was solely owned by a holding company. Standard obfuscation. But the service address listed on a minor vendor application. It was a boarded-up laundromat in a forgotten part of town. Fake. The company was a ghost. Created to funnel money. Whose money? Ours. Next up, the HOA's independent auditor, a Mr. Bartholomew K. Sneed, whose glowing annual reports assured residents that Golden Sunset's finances were as pristine as its chemically treated lawns. A little light social media sleuthing, amazing what people put online, revealed Mrs. Penelope Shaw, Gregory's wife, gushing about her darling brother Barty's recent visit. Bartholomew K. Sneed was Gregory Shaw's brother-in-law. Independent. My left foot, the fox wasn't just guarding the hen house. He'd outsourced security to his cousin, the wolf, Arthur Jenkins. The grumpy ex-CPA confirmed my suspicions about Sneed. Always wondered about that guy. He huffed. His reports are masterpieces of obfuscation. All fluff. No substance. Never seen an audit with so many footnotes leading to nowhere. The elder care angle was next. Several residents, including Elsie, had recently been assigned wellness companions or in-home support by a company called Serene Transitions Care. Their fees were also appearing on the HOA statements as recommended ancillary services. Serene Transitions Care, another blandly reassuring name. Another P.O. box. And after a deeper dive into corporate filings that cost me a decent online search fee, another financial link emerged. One of Serene Transitions' principal investors was a private equity firm where Gregory Shaw sat on the advisory board. The man had his greedy fingers in every pot. I needed an inside perspective. I remembered a kind-faced nurse, Maria, who used to work for Serene Transitions, often seen at Elsie's villa. She'd quit abruptly a few weeks ago. I found her working at a small clinic downtown. Miss Lin, she said. Her eyes guarded when I introduced myself and mentioned Golden Sunset. Maria, I'm worried about some of the residents, Elsie Harper, specifically, and the care she's receiving. Her professional mask wavered. They have protocols, she said carefully, for residents who are agitated or forgetful. Sometimes, the medication dosages, they weren't always what I would have recommended. The company had guidelines, strict ones, especially for patients whose families weren't local or actively involved. Guidelines that kept patients compliant, manageable. I asked. She just looked at me, her silence speaking volumes. Using medication to sedate and control, that wasn't care, that was chemical restraint for profit. The Henderson case, the man declared incompetent and shipped off, gnawed at me. I managed to track down his son, a stressed-out architect in Seattle. Dad was sharp as a tack, right up until he wasn't. According to them, he told me over the phone, his voice tight with residual anger and guilt. He started challenging the HOA board on their spending. Next thing, I get a call from this doctor, Alistair Finch. My ears perked up. Finch, he's a resident here, ex-cop. No, this was Dr. Alvin Finch, a geriatric psychiatrist, they said. Sent me a detailed report. Rapid onset dementia, inability to manage personal or financial affairs. I said Dad needed immediate specialized care. I flew down. Dad was confused, disoriented. Not himself. This doctor, Finch and Shaw were so persuasive. I signed the papers. Did you ever meet this doctor, Alvin Finch, in person? I asked. No. Just phone calls. Said he was very busy. It all happened so fast. I had a hunch. A quick search for Dr. Alvin Finch, geriatric psychiatry. Florida yielded nothing. No license. No practice. No such person. The diagnosis that stripped Henderson of his autonomy was likely a complete fabrication. A phantom diagnosis by a phantom doctor. I needed allies. My first call was to Elsie's son, David Harper. He was a lawyer up in Atlanta, sharp, articulate, and deeply concerned about his mother. He'd initially dismissed her complaints as mild confusion, but my evidence about the fake service company and the biased auditor had him on the next flight down. This is criminal. Maggie Lin, he said, his face grim as he reviewed my notes in my small villa. I believe it is, David. But we need more than belief. Through David, we connected with Sarah and Chloe, a couple in their late 50s who lived down the street. Sarah was a retired forensic accountant. Chloe, a former marketing exec. They'd noticed the weird fees too, but had been cowed by Shaw's aggressive dismissiveness. My findings, however, lit a fire under them. Our final recruit was Maria, the ex-nurse from Serene Transitions. Her conscience had been eating at her, and she was ready to talk. To help, we met in my villa. The five of us, the Sunset Watchers. Chloe christened us with a wry smile. Our first move was to try and get concrete evidence of Shaw's tactics. We couldn't just accuse. We needed to catch him in the act. We devised a series of soft traps. David, feigning concern for his mother's long-term finances, scheduled a meeting with Shaw to discuss estate planning options, and the perpetual internment fund he'd heard was so popular at Golden Sunset. A particularly ghoulish scam I'd learned about from another resident, designed to siphon off remaining assets under the guise of prepaid funeral expenses. David would wear a wire. Sarah, using her accounting background, would request a detailed audit review with Mr. Sneed, Shaw's brother-in-law, specifically querying the inflated invoices from Golden Sunset Premium Services LLC, hoping to get him on record defending the indefensible. Chloe, with her marketing savvy, would pose as a prospective resident's daughter, very concerned about her slightly forgetful mother needing to sign various HOA agreements and powers of attorney, and see how much pressure Shaw's team would apply. While they prepped, I followed another lead. A former housekeeper of Shaw's, a woman named Rosa, now cleaned for a resident 2 streets over. I caught her on her lunch break. Mr. Shaw? Rosa's eyes darted around nervously. He had meetings. Late. Not in his office. In the Villa 1, the model unit nobody lived in. Men in suits. Sometimes they carried briefcases. Always very quiet. He told me never to go near there on those nights. Said it was private HOA business. Private HOA business conducted in secret. In the dead of night, it screamed conspiracy. The pieces were falling into place, forming an ugly picture of greed and exploitation, preying on the most vulnerable. Shaw wasn't just a tin pot dictator. He was a predator in a cashmere sweater, and the Sunset Watchers were about to turn up the heat. Alistair Finch caught my eye across the putting green the next morning. He raised an eyebrow, a silent question. I just gave him a small, enigmatic smile. He had no idea what was coming. Our soft traps yielded some interesting, if not entirely surprising, results. David's recorded conversation about the perpetual internment fund had Shaw practically drooling over Elsie's fictional remaining assets, painting the scam as a dignified final arrangement solution. Sarah's meeting with Bartholomew Sneed, the auditor brother-in-law, got him on tape blustering about proprietary vendor agreements when pressed on the ludicrous fees from Golden Sunset Premium Services LLC. Chloe's encounter with Shaw's membership coordinator revealed an aggressive push for her forgetful mother to sign a blanket power of attorney just to make things easier. Dear, it was all damning. But Shaw was slippery. We needed more. Apparently, our discreet inquiries hadn't been discreet enough. Or perhaps Shaw just had a sixth sense for dissent. The first salvo from his counter-offensive landed in my mailbox. An official-looking letter from the Golden Sunset Villas Wellness Committee. another of Shaw's Orwellian creations, politely requesting I schedule a confidential cognitive health assessment with a recommended specialist. The implication was clear. Fall in line, or we'll Henderson you. I filed it under G for garbage. The rumors started subtly, then spread like a rash. Did you hear about that Maggie Lin? Apparently. She has a history, erratic behavior. Someone said she's paranoid. Thinks everyone is out to get her. Classic. If you can't discredit the message, discredit the messenger. I almost had to admire the textbook execution. Then things got less subtle. Sarah, our forensic accountant, found her car's tires slashed one morning. No note, no witnesses. Just a silent, ugly message. The Sunset Watchers were officially on Shaw's radar, and he was done playing nice. As if to underscore his impunity, the HOA announced the launch of the Golden Sunset Growth Fund, a new investment opportunity exclusively for residents, promising guaranteed high-yield returns and community-first financial stewardship. It was another blatant piggy bank scheme, dressed up in reassuring financial jargon. I could almost hear Shaw licking his chops. One evening, a plain white envelope appeared under my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a cheap USB stick and a typed note. He knows you're watching? Be careful. Some of us want him stopped too. My blood ran colder than the iced tea I'd been nursing. On the drive was a single audio file. Shaw's voice, low and chilling, clearly recorded in one of his night meetings. These resistant elements, Lin, that Harper woman's son, a few others, they need to be neutralized, discouraged, if necessary. Eliminated from the community equation. Permanently. Eliminated. That had a distinctly final ring to it. A week later, Mr. Abernathy, a resident from C Block who'd loudly and publicly challenged Shaw about the security upgrade assessment a few months prior, before my arrival, died suddenly. The official notice from the HOA cited a minor cerebrovascular event. His daughter, who lived out of state, was devastated but accepted the community doctor's another Shaw crony. No doubt swift diagnosis, a minor stroke, or a conveniently timed exit for a vocal critic. The air in Golden Sunset Villas grew thick with unspoken fear. I knew we couldn't trust any official HOA channels. Before the next board meeting, where they were set to rubber-stamp the minutes approving the Sunset Growth Fund, I paid a late-night visit to the grand ballroom. My old PI kit still had a few tricks in it, including a couple of discreet, motion-activated micro cameras. One went into a dusty silk flower arrangement, another tucked behind a loose ceiling tile, both with a perfect view of the boardroom table. The footage from that meeting was enraging. Shaw and his cronies, after the public portion, casually altering vote tallies on a minor bylaw amendment, laughing about how old Mrs. Henderson wouldn't have known the difference anyway. They were brazen. Our Sunset Watchers meetings became more clandestine. We were making progress, but something felt off. Shaw seemed to anticipate some of our moves. A planned anonymous survey about HOA fees was preempted by Shaw issuing his own, heavily biased community satisfaction poll. When David Harper tried to access specific financial records through official channels, citing his mother's rights, the documents were either unavailable or heavily redacted, as if Shaw knew exactly what he was looking for. The horrible suspicion began to dawn. We had a leak, a mole. Someone in our small circle was feeding information to Shaw. My stomach twisted. Who? David was fiercely protective of Elsie. Sarah and Chloe were all in, their professional ethics outraged. Maria, the nurse, seemed genuinely remorseful and eager to help. It was a sickening thought. While investigating the fine print on the Serene Transitions care contracts, the ones that tied into Shaw's network, I found it, buried deep within pages of legalese. A clause titled Confidentiality and Service Adherence Agreement. It wasn't just about confidentiality. It was a cleverly worded waiver, effectively forcing residents who used these preferred read Shaw-affiliated services to relinquish their right to sue over disputes or substandard care. They were signing away their recourse. The mole issue was paramount. I needed to get closer to Shaw's inner world, find someone who knew his past, his patterns. My discreet inquiries led me to a surprising discovery. Patricia Ainsworth, a quiet, elegant woman who lived in the newer Lakeside Villas section, was Gregory Shaw's first wife. They'd divorced over 30 years ago. long before Golden Sunset. She'd moved here recently, apparently unaware he was the kingpin until she arrived. Awkward. It took some persuading, but eventually, fueled by decades of resentment and seeing his old patterns emerge, Patricia agreed to talk. Oh, Gregory always had a fund. Maggie, she said, her voice laced with bitterness over Earl Grey tea in her sun-dappled villa. Back then, it was the evergreen retirement assurance plan. Our same promises, same vague accounting, same way of charming and then bullying anyone who questioned him. He bankrupted 3 families I knew personally before he skipped town. I was a fool to ever believe him. He's a con man with a good tailor. She agreed to provide a sworn affidavit detailing his previous scams. It was a major breakthrough. Meanwhile, the Sunset Watchers, now operating with a new layer of internal caution, realized we needed to follow the money beyond just the fake LLCs. That's where Leo, the young hacker I'd clocked in the clubhouse library, came in. His grandmother, Mrs. Petrov, was one of the residents being fleeced. When I approached him, showed him some of the evidence, and explained how his grandmother was a target, his bored apathy vanished. That son of a bitch, he muttered, his fingers already flying across his keyboard. Give me everything you have on their financials, any account numbers, any wire transfers. Let's see where the rabbit hole really goes. A few days later, he called me, his voice buzzing with excitement. Maggie, you are not going to believe this. Golden Sunset Premium Services, Serene Transitions, even that new Sunset Growth Fund, they're all funneling payments through a series of shell corporations, and the ultimate destination for a big chunk of it, a bank in the Cayman Islands. Untraceable, almost offshore accounts, a history of similar scams, medical fraud, vote rigging, potential manslaughter. Shaw wasn't just a greedy HOA president, he was a seasoned criminal. And the mole in our group, they were now a clear and present danger, not just to our investigation, but potentially to our safety. The game had just leveled up, and the stakes were higher than ever. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. The knowledge of a mole within the Sunset Watchers cast a chilling pall over our efforts. We became more guarded, our meetings smaller, our communications more cryptic. But Leo, our resident tech whiz, was undeterred by the offshore accounts. Untraceable is a challenge, not a full stop. Maggie, he'd said, a glint in his eye. He was already working on piercing that veil. Meanwhile, I decided to play by Shaw's supposed rules, citing the HOA bylaws, the very ones he so flagrantly ignored. I formally requested access to all detailed financial records for the past 5 years, specifically those pertaining to Golden Sunset Premium Services, LLC, and the new Sunset Growth Fund. The response, delivered by Shaw's smirking assistant, was a polite middle finger. We regret to inform you that due to a recent server migration and data integrity protocols, access to archived detailed financial logs is temporarily restricted. All summary audits, as prepared by Sneed and Associates, remain available for your perusal. Temporarily restricted? Right. More like permanently deleted. Shaw was scrubbing the evidence. But Shaw underestimated Leo. Deleted doesn't mean gone, especially if their IT security is as sloppy as their ethics. Leo had explained, working from backups he'd ethically acquired from the HOA's notoriously insecure server before they'd even thought to restrict access. And by painstakingly reconstructing fragmented files from discarded hard drives he'd salvaged from the community recycling bins. Don't ask. I didn't. He managed to recover a significant portion of the deleted data. He even reconstructed the audio from that anonymous USB stick, the one where Shaw talked about eliminating resistant residents, which I suspected had been remotely wiped or corrupted after I'd first listened to it. Leo found the ghost of it in a temp file on my own laptop. The kid was a digital necromancer. Empowered by this recovered treasure trove, I formally petitioned for an emergency residence meeting to discuss grave financial misconduct and potential fiduciary breaches by the board. The response was swift and predictable. Your request for an additional ad hoc assembly has been reviewed and denied. Maggie Lin. As per Article 9, Section 3, residents are not permitted to continuously disrupt HOA operations with unsubstantiated claims. You have exhausted your procedural rights in this matter. Exhausted my rights. Like hell, I had. The regularly scheduled quarterly HOA meeting, however, was unavoidable, even for Shaw. It was set for the following Tuesday in the Grand Ballroom. This would be our stage. David Harper had been busy, armed with Patricia Ainsworth's affidavit, Leo's recovered data, our recordings, and the evidence of medical fraud. He'd compiled a damning dossier and delivered it to the state attorney's office and the Division of Financial Services. He'd told them about the upcoming meeting. He couldn't guarantee they'd act, or when, but the fuse was lit. The atmosphere in the Grand Ballroom that Tuesday was thick enough to spread on toast. Word had gotten out, through Dolores's quiet network and the increasingly anxious whispers, that something big was about to go down. Local news vans were parked discreetly down the street. Lena Washington, the reporter who'd helped expose the mangrove corruption, had put me in touch with a colleague specializing in white-collar crime. Even a few curious, worried-looking folks from neighboring HOAs had shown up. Drawn by the scent of a potential takedown, they hoped might inspire similar action in their own overbearing communities. Shaw, flanked by his loyal and likely soon-to-be indicted board members, opened the meeting with his usual smarmy confidence, droning on about community cohesion and the bright future of the Sunset Growth Fund. He clearly thought he'd weathered the storm. He didn't see me stand up until I was halfway to the podium. "Mr. Shaw," I said, my voice clear and amplified by the microphone I'd more or less commandeered. "While your vision of the future is colorful, I believe the residents deserve to hear about your rather creative interpretation of the past and present." Shaw's face tightened. "Mrs. Lin, you are out of order. This is not on the agenda." "Oh, I think it is." "Gregory," I said, dropping the honorific. "It's on the agenda of every resident you've defrauded, intimidated, and endangered." And then I laid it all out. Leo's recovered spreadsheets showing the direct flow of HOA funds through Golden Sunset Premium Services and Serene Transitions Care into the Cayman Islands accounts. Patricia Ainsworth's sworn statement about his identical scams decades prior. The recording of him ordering the elimination of dissenters. The fraudulent medical reports. The footage from my hidden camera showing them rigging votes. Each piece of evidence was projected onto the large screen behind the podium. A tidal wave of criminality. The room was utterly silent, save for my voice and the occasional gasp. Shaw was sputtering, his face a mottled red, but his usual glib responses failed him. As I presented the final piece of evidence, a detailed breakdown of how the perpetual internment fund was structured to bleed estates dry, the main doors of the Grand Ballroom burst open. 2 uniformed police officers and 3 stern-faced individuals in dark suits, badges displayed, strode in. David Harper was right behind them, a grimly satisfied look on his face. "Gregory Shaw," one of the officers announced, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You are under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Another suited figure addressed the board. "We are from the Division of Financial Services. This HOA's assets are hereby frozen, pending a full forensic audit." That's when the dam of feigned civility and forced smiles truly broke. "He did it to my husband," a woman cried out, rising from her seat, tears streaming down her face. "He had him sign papers for that growth fund when he was so sick from the chemo. He didn't know what he was doing." Another resident, old Mr. Peterson, frail but his voice surprisingly strong, stood up. "They told me my son wanted me to give them power of attorney. My son lives in Australia." It was a lie. One by one, others rose, their voices joining a chorus of a community finally finding its courage. Their personal stories of coercion, of being forced to sign documents while confused by medication, deliberately mismanaged by Serene Transitions nurses, painting an even more vivid picture of Shaw's depravity. The sight of Gregory Shaw, the untouchable king of Golden Sunset Villas, being handcuffed and led away, was met with a stunned silence. Then a smattering of applause that quickly swelled into a roar. Some people were cheering, others openly weeping with relief. The oppressive, suffocating atmosphere that had plagued this community for so long shattered like cheap glass, replaced by an almost giddy sense of liberation. Even Alistair Finch, standing near the back, caught my eye and gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Coming from him, it was practically a standing ovation. I scanned the crowd for the mole. My eyes landed on Chloe, our marketing exec. She wasn't cheering. She was pale, staring at the departing police cars. And then she quietly slipped out a side door. The betrayal stung. But in the grand scheme of things, she was just another pawn Shaw had manipulated. Her reckoning would come. The fight for Golden Sunset Villas was over. The cleanup would be long and arduous, but the reign of terror had ended. As I watched Elsie Harper embrace her son David, a genuine, unburdened smile lighting up her face for the first time since I'd met her, I knew this was why I could never truly retire. There were always more puzzles, always more bastards, and always people worth fighting for. The arrest of Gregory Shaw didn't magically fix Golden Sunset Villas, but it was like lancing a festering boil. The immediate aftermath was a strange mix of chaos and profound relief. The State Financial Services Division swooped in, placing the HOA under temporary independent oversight. They were a no-nonsense bunch, poring over every ledger, every contract, every email Leo had managed to resurrect from the digital graveyard. It was like watching a team of archaeologists excavate a particularly scummy ruin. I found myself, somewhat reluctantly, roped into the rebuilding effort. Not as a board member, God forbid, but as a consultant, a resident with a vested interest and a PI's knack for sniffing out bullshit. Our little group, the Sunset Watchers, minus Chloe, who had quietly sold her villa and disappeared faster than Shaw's supposed ethics, became the nucleus of a reform committee. David Harper, Elsie's son, provided the legal framework. Sarah, a forensic accountant, was invaluable in untangling Shaw's deliberately convoluted bookkeeping. Maria, the nurse, helped advocate for better, more transparent healthcare liaisons. Our guiding principles were simple: absolute transparency, ironclad independent audits by a reputable firm, not someone's brother-in-law, and, crucially, a free legal aid clinic specifically for senior residents, staffed by pro bono lawyers David knew, to help them navigate contracts and understand their rights. No more signing away your life savings in the fine print. One of our best initiatives was the Seniors Oversight Committee. Arthur Jenkins, the grumpy ex-CPA, surprisingly volunteered, as did several other residents who'd been directly scammed by Shaw. And, in a twist I hadn't anticipated, Alistair Finch, the ex-detective, offered his dubious expertise. As he put it, someone's got to keep an eye on the new foxes. Lean, he'd grumbled, though there was a grudging respect in his tone these days. Their job was to be a permanent watchdog, a voice for the residents, ensuring the new HOA board stayed honest. When the time came to elect a new HOA president, a few well-meaning folks nominated me. I shut that down fast. Thank you, but my talents lie in kicking down doors, not managing building maintenance schedules. I told them, you need someone with financial acumen and a genuine commitment to service, not a retired bloodhound. Sarah, with her sharp mind and unwavering integrity, was the obvious choice. She accepted, reluctantly at first, then with a determined set to her jaw. Golden Sunset was in capable hands. Leo's digital wizardry had provided the roadmap for the investigators to trace Shaw's ill-gotten gains. The Cayman Islands accounts weren't as impenetrable as Shaw had hoped. The process of asset recovery was slow, a grinding legal battle. But it had begun. For residents like Elsie, who'd had her accounts systematically drained, it offered a glimmer of hope that some of their stolen security could be clawed back. Then came the trial. I was called as a key witness. Standing in that courtroom, taking the oath, felt strangely familiar and utterly terrifying. It had been 20 years since I'd last testified in a major case. A case that had gone sideways, partly due to a rookie mistake on my part, a misinterpretation of evidence that had haunted my professional confidence for years. But as I looked out at the courtroom, saw Elsie and David giving me small, encouraging smiles, and locked eyes with Shaw, who looked shrunken and pathetic without his aura of manufactured authority. The old fear receded. I recounted the investigation, the intimidation, the web of deceit he'd spun, my voice steady, my memory clear. This time, the evidence was irrefutable. This time, justice wouldn't be a casualty of my past doubts. It felt like closing a very old, very painful chapter. There were other, smaller victories that warmed the soul. Leo, our teenage hacker prodigy, received a full scholarship to MIT from a newly established cybersecurity foundation dedicated to protecting financial technologies from exactly the kind of exploitation he'd helped uncover. He was going to use his powers for good, on a much grander scale. Mrs. Petrov was bursting with pride, a young, eager blogger who'd been following the case through Lena Washington's continued reporting, approached me for an interview. She wanted to write a series for an online investigative journal. Her proposed title, The Golden Gatekeepers, How One Retirement Community Fought Back Against the Wolves in Cardigans. I liked the sound of it. If our story could empower even one more community to stand up, it was worth telling. The legal system grinds slowly, but it grinds. Shaw was convicted on multiple counts. His sentence was hefty, but this was America. 6 months later, word trickled through the legal grapevine. Gregory Shaw, out on bail pending appeal, had been spotted, not in another state, not even another town, here, or rather, trying to get here. A new boutique investment firm called Phoenix Legacy Partners had made an unsolicited, overly generous offer to buy a block of recently foreclosed properties on the edge of Golden Sunset. Properties that had belonged to some of Shaw's most devastated victims. The Phoenix trying to rise from the ashes had Shaw's smarmy fingerprints all over its glossy prospectus. Sarah, as the new HOA president, backed by the seniors oversight committee, and armed with all the legal tools we'd put in place, shut them down hard. The wolves might change their fleece, but we'd learned to recognize the teeth. A few evenings later, Elsie and I were sitting on my small patio, watching the sky blaze into its customary Florida sunset spectacular. The air was calm. The only sounds the distant chirp of crickets and the gentle clinking of ice in our lemonade glasses. Elsie was more like her old self these days, her memory sharper, her laughter more frequent now that the cloud of financial fear had lifted. It's so peaceful now. Maggie, she said softly, her eyes on the horizon. I took a sip of my lemonade, the tartness a pleasant bite. Peace isn't about avoiding trouble. Elsie, I said, thinking of Shaw, of the fight, of the vigilance still needed. It's about looking it right in the eye and not backing down. That's when you find the quiet on the other side. She smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile, and as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of defiant gold and fiery orange, I thought, yeah, that's exactly what it is. The quiet on the other side, earned. Stories like this aren't just fiction, they reflect real fears, real power, and real silence. What would you do if your HOA turned against you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. And if you want more stories that pull back the curtain on power, control, and quiet resistance, hit that subscribe button and stay close. We're just getting started.